Well, thank you very much to Peter and Palace. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. We now turn our focus on South Africa's problem at hand, which is load shedding. Eskom board chairperson Jabu Mabuza says load shedding comes as a result of reduction in supply while repairs are being done on units. Mabuza has admitted that Eskom's capacity is not meeting the demand. He says spending of maintenance has decreased over time and money intended for plant maintenance was never used for this purpose. For more on this crisis that the country is facing, we are now joined by Adil Nchabeleng, who is Group Chief Executive at Whitford Group. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Firstly, should we summarize the problem that we're having in South Africa right now as a crisis?
Look, at the current stage is beyond the crisis. The crisis was when we had the first load shedding stage 1, 2. Now it's escalated to stage 4. And pretty soon, if they don't get their act together, it's going to go to stage 5 and 6. So we're at the catastrophe level when the system is breaking apart so much that there is no way they can intervene except just let time take its course, because that's what happened. The power stations should have been maintained in time, and they didn't do the maintenance. They stacked it up, which means they neglected the maintenance, stacked it up. Since the new board came into board, they didn't push for any maintenance to happen. Now the maintenance processes have caught up with Eskom, and the power stations are failing to carry the current load. Why? Because they haven't done the right job.
You know, the unions were saying that they are challenging the level of competency of the current board. In your opinion, do you think that the current management is on point in dealing with this, or are they failing the nation?
Which management? Eskom does not have a current management. You have a CEO, you have a COO, and we know nothing about the extra executives. The board itself is clueless. The whole Eskom saga of the crisis and the catastrophe now is run by the Minister of Private Enterprises, Pravin, and in support with some engineers within Eskom. So there is no board, there is no existence of a competent management which is now taking charge.
But the report that he's saying is that the problems at Eskom are structural, financial and operational.
What is new in that? We've always said that the problem in Eskom is structural and financial, and particularly to do with the maintenance and the management of power stations. Remember, right now, Eskom has lost 20,000 megawatts out of its production cycle, which means they are running at half capacity. How do you have a full capacity plant and you find yourself in a half capacity state and you don't ask yourself key questions? The new board has had over a year. They've been in place. They should have been doing what needs to be done, which is ramp up the current power plants that are actually offline, bring it back into line, make sure that you don't actually force shut down power plants, which is what they're doing right now. The current crisis of the load shedding is because there's a lot of power plants that are forced to shut down. So you have to now go on to emergency unit. Emergency units are not based on coal. They are actually diesel driven and gas driven, which means you are going to spend more money unnecessarily generating the same electricity which you should have been generating normally.
But in the same breath, the nation would have expected that if we have Casilla and Medupi power stations, they could have been contributing thousands of megawatts into the national grid.
Out of the Casilla build program, it was one of the most disastrous build I've ever seen in the world, whereby you give a EPC contractor, all right, a open checkbook. He starts off at 70 billion, and then he escalates the cost to almost 200 billion. One is sitting at 210 billion, the other one is sitting at 190 billion. Where do you find such a build in the world? If I'm building a house today, I cannot allow an architect or a construction company to have an open checkbook, and when they need, they can always take, which means there's been an abusive practice, there's been overrun in terms of cost, and who has been the beneficiaries? The 3 companies that were contracted and all the other subcontracting companies, Black & Veatch, you're looking at GE, Mitsubishi, you're looking at as well as Hitachi. They've been abusing. The state has been abused. So that build itself is a crisis. They have to write off the losses. If they can recover from the current guys, they have to institute a recovery process of the money lost. In no way in the world you give a engineering company as well as a construction company an open check and they don't have accountability.
But then if you come with a solution-based problem that you say, what is the functionality of independent power producers, and if they are costing Eskom a lot of money, what value are they adding to the national power provider?
Do you know what is the irony about IPPs? No IPP company has ever told the country that actually the power they are producing is not even used by Eskom. None of it. Currently, IPPs are sitting at 300 plus 400 at a given time. The peak it goes is about 800 megawatts pumped into the grid. Eskom cannot take that power. It has to dump it immediately on the gate, which means completely discard it and not use it, because in order to meet the demand, you have to scale it up and match it with gas or any other support so that it actually can be fed in the grid. South African grid was not built for IPPs. They didn't tell the people that. So it's a waste of money unnecessarily. It should have been prevented and introduced in a smaller scale. We support IPPs to be actually located in residential areas, to be located in industrial areas where they can support small microgrid solution, not the current program whereby we're paying a huge amount of money, 86 IPPs that are not even feeding any single kilowatt into the national grid to help us with load shedding. IPPs don't contribute anything today to the load shedding problem. And our lawmakers understand that. The president understands that. The current ministers understand that. Eskom understands it, but they are not making the decisive decision of removing it.
Let's touch on the issue of maintenance, because CEO Pagamani Khadebe weighed in on the issue of maintenance earlier. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Starting from 2013-14, it starts from 32 billion, it goes to 30 billion, 27, 26. Then there's a blip, there's an increase in 2015-2016 of 27 billion. But that blip was primarily because when government recapitalized Eskom, it insisted that money should be spent on maintenance. Then it goes further down to 20 billion by the time we come here. So the truth of the matter is that spending on maintenance has decreased over time.
What do you make out of that?
He's confirmed what we've been saying, Colin, all this time, that Eskom has not budgeted. In their annual financial statements, you can read it. The FS says very clearly there's no set-aside monies which are prioritized for actually maintaining power plants. So it gives you that scenario whereby this negligence, we've warned 6 months before load shedding that the country is going to go into load shedding. We did the second load shedding. When the load shedding happened, we did indicate to the minister that you have a crisis in South Africa. They did nothing about it. We had December, November, December. Now we are in January, in March, where now there is a catastrophic situation where the system is breaking down. It simply cannot keep up. And there's not really any support available. And now they have to do up what they are currently doing, which is catching up and then waking up. Yet the CEO, who says, yes, we have not budgeted before properly, agrees that there is a crisis and they need to resolve it, but it seems like they don't even know how to resolve it. They're still investigating, by the way.
But by the way, when you talk about investigation, Minister Pravin Gordhan was talking about lack of accountability and the push factor, and secondly, the issue of sabotage. Listen to this.
There's still a lot of accountability, which I'm sure you're going to ask about in a moment, that needs to take place. I think the previous CEO and his colleagues of that time have a lot to explain to South Africa. A lot emerged during the parliamentary inquiry process. South Africans seem to, particularly the media, seems to forget that from time to time. There are a lot before the Zondo Commission now. So we also know that there is a fight back stroke pushback. So old narratives are being revived in the hope that they can become dominant narratives so people can stay out of jail, stay away from prosecution, and so on. But I'll come back to that point in a moment. On the sabotage question, there are many people who are speculating on this. I don't want to get into that right now. Once we're ready to tell you with concrete evidence what is going on or not going on, we'll talk about it. But there's no doubt that in the industrial strikes that we had in June, July, that Mr. Mabuza referred to, you had all sorts of things happening. Roads being shut down, so coal couldn't come in, oil couldn't come in, ash wouldn't be removed.
Right, two things there. The pushback factor, lack of accountability there. The CEO has a lot of explaining to do. Rather, the former CEO has a lot of explaining to do. What do you say about that?
On the pushback, it becomes a very strong narrative because Pravin, every time he speaks, he says there is something called fight back. I don't know what fight back they're referring to. But if people are fighting back, I know consumers are really irritated with the current cost of electricity in South Africa, and people no longer buy the stories of blaming the previous regime for everything that has happened. There has been a lot of mess happening in Eskom. It doesn't start yesterday. These power stations were inherited over 25 years ago. They didn't build any brand new power stations for over 25 years. Only the last 10 years where they introduced 3 power stations, Medupi, Casilla, and Ngula. They didn't do anything yet before. So how do you inherit a car 25 years before you even came into power? You then use the same car today when it is giving you normal aging as well as refurbishment maintenance requirement. You still want to blame the previous person and all of those things. Accountability says, if I'm a leader, if I was in charge of Eskom today, and I say from here on today, going to the next cycle of a 1 year, I'm going to give you results of what I perform and ensure that I can deliver. This thing where politicians give us this lame excuses of continuously referring to somebody who has done something wrong. Praveen was the Minister of Treasury. He knew about these problems in Eskom from 2007 when he was in SARS. He knew about it when he was the Minister of Treasury then. Why didn't he correct all of these things? Sabotage. He left it to happen.
Okay, sabotage.
Sabotage part of it is very interesting actually. We believe that there is actually not even sabotage, an intention to cause rolling mass load blackouts as well as load shedding. How? There are people that have been reintroduced into Eskom that were actually particularly involved in pushing for load shedding. That load shedding, remember, when there is a load shedding, you have to go into crisis and emergency power stations. Those power stations are using diesel. Who supplies diesel in Eskom? Those power stations are using gas. Who's going to be supplying all of those things? So some of these things, they have to explain in detail that somebody is making a fortune and a killing whenever there's an emergency.
Shouldn't we be knowing who these people are now?
It's obvious. I mean, it's a known fact that there is a consortium that is enjoying a lot of money that Eskom is paying. You know, and unfortunately, most of these people happen to be linked to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Himself, at some point, was a coal supplier. He is currently producing electricity from Mozambique under Shanduka Greco, pumping it into South Africa. The Kahora Bassa line that is currently problematic is coming out of that. He is a beneficiary of that. There is, again, the issue of the coal supply in South Africa. Top 5 companies who are JSE listed have never changed. There is an issue of the evergreen contract coal suppliers who have never changed historically. So the fundamentals of it are very steep in really unnecessary issues of corruption, benefiting unduly from the state, and the aspect of greed.
Just very quickly now, the solution. What needs to be done for South Africa to get out of load shedding now?
Build new power stations, go back into maintenance.
New power station again.
How are you going to grow an economy when you don't have power?
Which power stations and where will the money come from?
I mean,
there's Casilla and...
No, remember, if you don't have power, you don't have an economy. 20 years down the line from now, if you have not built brand new power station today, you'll be sitting and saying, Adil predicted that we're going to have this crisis. You need to build brand new power stations. You need to introduce what we call refit tariff on houses
we'll be back
and
10
residential.
Years backwards now.
You have to go back and do the fundamentals. Right. Power stations and build brand new program. Forget about the mess they created in Medupi, Casilla, and Ngula, and start a brand new build program. And make sure you double your electricity. If 45,000 to 48,000 is our current capacity, double it and triple it so that we can grow this economy and explode it for manufacturing, for people to come and invest, and for electricity to be cheap.
So much to talk about, and I wonder if we will ever finish it in this interview. But okay, second round coming soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Adil Nchabeleng, who is Group Chief Executive at Whitford Group. Well, our question of the day. Did Eskom's media briefing today address your concerns and questions on load shedding? Send us your comments at SAtoday_SABC. Remember to also send us your voice and video comments to our WhatsApp line 081 7328 421. The number again 081 7328 421. We take a break, and when we come back, we continue with our program. Stay with us.